Okay, I'm going to attempt to shoot a video here showing you how I make my simple bread, white bread for sandwiches. This is probably the easiest bread recipe that I've come across, and I've tried a lot and I almost gave up on making bread simply because I had such a hard time with them. This one's really easy. So if you've ever thought about making bread and thought it might be too hard or something, give this a try. So what we have here, everything's going to be made in the stand mixer. That makes it a lot easier. And what we got here is 5 1/4 cups white flour. You can use bread flour. I just use all-purpose. I got 4 tablespoons of sugar, 1 1/2 teaspoon salt, 1 1/2 teaspoon pretty rounded, 1 1/2 tablespoons rounded instant yeast, 1 1/2 teaspoons oil, and then 2 cups of warm water. You want it, around 110 to 120 degrees. Too cold, it will not activate the yeast. Too hot, it'll kill the yeast. I just go with straight hot water out of my tap, and by the time I get all my stuff together and make it, it seems to rise fine. Okay, first thing we want to do is mix together all the dry ingredients. Just go ahead and dump them in your mixer bowl. There's the flour, sugar, salt. Try to keep it to one side of the bowl, and then yeast, and put it to the opposite side. You don't want the yeast and salt to come in direct contact. Once everything mixes together, it'll be fine, but you just don't want to pour the salt directly on top of the yeast or vice versa. We'll give this a stir by hand before we hook it up to the mixer, and then we'll let the dough hook finish mixing it. So I'm going to mix in the salt and flour on this side first with the sugar, and just slowly incorporate the yeast. The salt can kill the yeast if it gets directly on it, so we want to avoid that. And then, like I said, we're just kind of incorporating everything by hand real quick, and then we'll put it on the mixer and let it do its thing. We can put on my dough hook, raise it up. I just run it on low. On my mixer, it's about 2. Let that mix for a minute, make sure everything gets good and incorporated, and then we'll add our wet ingredients. So now it's just kind of like what they call a rough or shaggy dough. Pretty much all the dry is incorporated, and we just let the kneading hook do its thing. Again, for my mixer, this is on like 2 or 3. You want it slow, not real fast. And then we let it go here for 5 to 10 minutes until the dough looks pretty smooth and stretchy. No more of that rough, shaggy look. So now what I do, gives you a look at how it looks like when it came out of the stand mixer. Like I said, I let that run for about 10 minutes. You can kind of see how the dough is nice and smooth. Touch it, it's not sticky, but it is sticking to the side of the bowl, so that's pretty good consistency. I just sprayed my cutting block here, just give it a touch. Sprayed my cutting board here with a little bit of cooking spray. You just want to lightly oil it. For this bread, we do not want to use flour. To keep things from sticking, I want to use oil. This is going to be a little tricky because I'm trying to film this with my phone in one hand. Let me pull this dough out and I'll be right back. Okay, there it is. Now all you want to do is, I'm going to just knead it a couple times. You don't necessarily have to do that. I just like to do it to get the shape. And then we'll divide it in half and then shape it into loaves for our loaf pans. I'll show you that after I'm done. Like I said, I won't be able to film while I'm kneading. Seriously, like 10 or 15 kneads is more than enough. You can do more, it's not going to hurt it, but this bread doesn't really need a lot of kneading because the machine does all the work for us. So I just got it up in a round ball here. Now what I'm going to do is divide it in half and then put it in my baking pans, which I also just lightly sprayed with some cooking oil. There's our 2 halves. throw them in the pans. That one in that pan. That one in that pan. And if you want, you can kind of shape it out, push it into the corners of the pan. This dough is pretty resilient. You're not going to deflate it or hurt it. I do find if you stretch it to the corners before you let it proof, it does make a nicer rise. Sorry, I can't keep my eyes on that again. There's that one. Do the same with this one. Just trying to push it all down into the corner as best you can and just make the whole loaf flat across the pan. You'll end up with something that looks about like that. Gonna let these rest. Depending on temperature in your house, kitchen, wherever it is you let your bread rise, it can rise up as fast as 30 minutes. My house is usually not that warm. It takes about an hour. Regardless, it's not a big deal. You can go off and do something else. You just want to lightly cover these with a flour sack, dish towel. I don't like to use plastic wrap because it always seems to stick to the bread. Anyhow, we're just going to let these rise till they have a dome over the top of the loaf pan. You want them to at least be to the top of the pan if possible to give you a nice tall loaf for baking. They won't really rise anymore in the oven, so whatever you get here in the proofing is how big your loaf will be after you bake. Let's see what they look like after they've been proofing. Okay, the bread has proofed and risen. So you can see the loaves are, I don't know if it'll show up there, but they're about an inch in the center over the top of the pan. That's about where you want it. These are going to bake up real nice. Throw them in the oven and take a look at them after they come out. There they are, straight out of the oven. I always like to get them out of the pans and onto the rack as soon as possible so they don't sweat inside the pan. There they are. Quick, easy, simple, homemade bread. Give it a try.